for the second meeting with residents regarding the rental assistance demonstration program. I'm going to let Ms. McRoberts provide a little bit of housekeeping instruction before we get started. Lee?
I'll mute myself. Sorry about that. Welcome, everybody. Just a couple of things to keep in mind. We've got a lot of people on the call today, which is great, but if you would keep yourself on mute, we are recording this evening and sound picks up with everything. So if you would keep yourself on mute, we would appreciate that. The recordings are available on our YouTube channel. This one will be posted within the next 24 to 48 hours. The meeting that was held 2 weeks ago is on our YouTube channel and also on our website under housing on a page called RAD resources. So that's some good information there along with the Q&A from last time. If you have any questions this evening, please put those in the chat and we'll get those answered after Ms. Herrera's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Okay, we're going to go through a short presentation to kind of give you an update from our last meeting, and then we'll open it up for questions for everybody. So just as a reminder for some of you that may not have been with us last time, or if you were, what we refer to as the scattered site properties is 18 different properties. And this slide here lists all of the properties. We have Archie Drive, Arsenal Hill, Atlas Road, Celia Saxon, Congaree Vista, The Corners, The Elderly Cottages, Fontaine Place, Greenfield, Pinewood Terrace, Fair Street, Overbrook Thornwell, Pine Forest, Rosewood Hills, Rosewood Senior, Waverly, Wheeler Hill, and Yorktown. Those 18 properties constitute what the Housing Authority refers to as scattered site properties. These are small properties that are located in various locations. All of these are going to be processed under the RAD program as a single RAD transaction. That's what we're talking to you about today, is all of these properties. Just as a reminder, what is RAD? RAD is a HUD demonstration program. It began back in 2012. And what RAD does is it takes the properties out of the public housing program and it converts them to project-based vouchers. And the reason that we do this is to allow us to be able to go out and access funds to improve properties, either through rehab or through new construction. So, and the reason that we have to access private funds is because historically, Congress has not allocated sufficient funding to be able to allow us to make the repairs that need to be made under the traditional public housing program. Once we convert the properties from public housing to project-based vouchers, we're now able to go out and get private lenders and private investors that can give us money that will allow us to make the improvements. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what the improvements may be. We anticipate that in the majority of the scattered site units, we will be doing substantial rehab. This will be major renovations, and it'll include almost all of the main components of your homes. We're looking at doing new kitchens with new appliances. We're going to add dishwashers and microwaves wherever possible. We're going to install new bathrooms with showers. We're trying to find room in each of the units for an in-unit washer and dryer. In addition to that, we're going to do new flooring. We'll have some new heating and air conditioning and hot water heaters. We'll have some new doors. We'll be painting. And in some of the buildings, we'll be replacing the roofs as well as the spouts and gutters. So this is all some of the work we'll be doing. What I do need to say is because we have 18 different properties in the scattered site, each property may have a few different things done to it. We still have the architects and engineers that are out looking at the properties, so we won't have a total detailed final scope of work until we get a little bit farther down the road. But these are all of the things that we're looking at doing, and we're hoping to do as much as possible of all of these things. When we do the rehab, what does this really mean for you? Basically, we want to do the rehab in phases so that we'll minimize any type of relocation. we'd like to be able to move the tenants within the site or within the project on a temporary basis. You are guaranteed a unit at the project. So everybody will be able to go back to a unit. It's important to remember, though, that when you go back to a unit, the unit has to be appropriate to your family size. So right now, if you're in a larger unit, you may have to go to a smaller unit. If you're in a smaller unit, we will try to accommodate you to a larger unit. As I mentioned, part of the RAD process, or a big component of the RAD process, is to convert the properties to vouchers. What that means is that the vouchers will actually be placed on the property, not to you as the family. But after 1 year of living in a RAD property, you then have the ability to request a mobile voucher under what's called choice mobility. So that would allow you to be able to get a tenant-based voucher and move elsewhere after you've lived in the RAD unit for 1 year. So what will happen is your public housing unit will end and that lease will end. You will sign a new lease for the RAD unit. And then after you've lived there for 1 year, you would have the choice then to be able to request a mobility voucher that would allow you to be able to move to another location. So most importantly, as far as the next steps, do not move. No one should move right now. As we mentioned last time, the RAD process does take time. It can take anywhere from 2 to 3 years. We will be communicating with you on an ongoing basis. We will schedule meetings like this on a regular basis throughout the RAD process to keep you informed of your community. And again, because the scattered sites consist of 18 different properties that are located all over the city, we will be working in groups. So there may be some of you that there might be something that'll get started, before next year or within the next year. And then some of you may not see anything happen till later next year. Some of you, it might start at the beginning of next year. We'll be doing the properties in groupings, and we will not be doing all properties at one time. And so yours will have a different timing depending on which property you're in. We have not yet finalized the phasing of how the construction work will be done. So I can't tell you today which properties we'll start with, but that'll be information that we'll be back in touch with you over the next couple of months to keep you informed on that. So I'm going to end the PowerPoint now, and we're going to open it up for questions. And as Ms. McRoberts said, put your questions in the chat, and then she'll read out the questions and we'll provide answers to you.
Ms. Herrera, we've got some good questions already, and let me start with the very first one. Someone's asking, in reading the HUD website, are we in violation of rules and regulations because we did not attend the first resident meeting?
No. The Housing Authority is required to sponsor 2 meetings, but basically, as a resident, obviously we want as many residents to attend as many meetings as possible. But if you did not attend the first meeting, and even if you didn't attend today, you will still be eligible for the RAD assistance and the RAD program. It will not impact your ability to be part of the RAD transition.
Great. You've got a question that you kind of touched on, but got somebody asking, do we have a timeline by property? And I know you mentioned that we haven't gotten to that point quite yet, but could you elaborate on that a little bit? Right.
Again, because we have 18 properties, we anticipate that we will probably be doing about 6 properties at a time, and we'll be doing them geographically so that we'll be doing the ones that are closest together. We're going to group them probably in 3 groups. And so we'll start with the first 6 properties. When those get done, we'll go to the next properties, and then we'll go to the final properties. I can't tell you today which are the first 6 properties we're going to start with because the architect and engineers have not finished all of their work. As they continue to do their work, then we will be able to know how we're going to group the various properties. And we'll get back to you with that and communicate with you what that process and timeline will be.
I know you mentioned the phasing approach. Can you explain a little bit about how that's going to work as far as emptying units in a complex and moving people into there, maybe into another unit within the group?
Right. Let me try to clarify a little bit about that. Again, because these are scattered site properties, it's a little bit more challenging. But what we anticipate we'll be doing is that if we start with 6 properties, for example, we will, once we receive HUD approval, we're going to submit, after our second meeting today, we'll now be able to submit our application to HUD. So our application will go to HUD probably before November the 15th. We hope to have the application submitted. HUD will take about 60 days, maybe because of the holidays, they might take a little longer. So we would anticipate having HUD's approval sometime in January. And then once we do that, if there's any vacancies that occur, we will not refill those vacancies. So if somebody moves out on their own just because they choose to move out, we will keep those apartments vacant. We will then use the vacancies to move people into while we do rehab. So let's say we start with the first group of properties and we want to vacate, 10 units. We will move those 10 families temporarily, and then they'll move back to a permanent unit once the construction is complete. Residents will have a few other options as well. So you'll either be able to move temporarily. In some cases, you can voluntarily elect to move permanently. But we're going to try to minimize the moves as much as possible. But everyone will move at least once. We're hoping that some of you, there may be a few of you that have to move twice, but we're hoping that most of you will be able to move just one time.
Okay, great. That sort of leads into the next question from the chat. If someone doesn't want to return to the property where their unit is currently, will they be able to get a housing choice voucher instead?
And I need to say that the answer to that is we aren't sure yet, because the vouchers that we receive are going to be tied to the unit. So if the housing authority was to have other vouchers available under its voucher program, you could get a voucher. But I want everyone to understand that you may not get one initially. You do have to, you're guaranteed to have a unit at the property. The voucher will initially be tied to that unit. And after 1 year of living in the new RAD unit, at that point, you can apply for a choice mobility voucher. We cannot guarantee everyone that there will be a voucher up front.
Okay. Now, if I apply for that housing choice mobility voucher, it's a tongue twister, how long does that usually take? Is that a normal voucher? Can I take that anywhere once I have it and have been approved for it?
The choice mobility voucher, basically there'll be like a special waiting list for choice mobility. So anybody that's living in a RAD apartment, you will go to the top of the list for a choice mobility voucher. As soon as a voucher is available, it will go to somebody on the choice list before it goes to anybody else. Once you receive a voucher, you will then be eligible to take that voucher any place you want to go in the country. The voucher is mobile and it will allow you to move anywhere in the country.
Great. Is there going to be a list of properties that folks are going to be able to choose from as they're asked to relocate during this renovation process?
I want to be very transparent. For temporary relocation, there may not be a lot of choice. In other words, we will assign a unit to you that says, this is where you're going to live on a temporary basis until we get your apartment finished. The time to do the work in the apartments, or the time that you might be temporarily relocated, will range from about 6 weeks to 16 weeks, depending on what is going to be done in your particular apartment. So everybody will move on a short-term basis versus a long-term basis. Once we move the first group of people on a short-term basis, we then are hoping, or we may have enough vacancies that we can do some work first and move people only one time. I think what's very important to remember is that you are guaranteed a unit back in the project, but it may not be the exact same unit. Because again, remember, as I mentioned, one of the requirements under RAD is that we have to put everybody back in the right size unit. So some of you may not be in a right size unit right now. And when you move, you would be required to go to the correct size unit.
Gotcha. Getting a question about moving expenses. What will the housing authority cover? What will we do during each move that we're asking the resident to make?
Right. We have professional moving companies that are under contract with the housing authority. And we will have professional movers that will move. There will be no cost to the residents. And we will provide all the moving materials, boxes and paper and tape and anything you need to be able to pack. And if you're elderly or disabled and you request, we also can have the movers do your packing and your unpacking for you. It really depends on each person's circumstance.
Great, great. And that's for each move. So if I'm one of the couple people that might have to move twice, Columbia Housing will cover the expenses each time that I have to move associated.
Yes, there will
with
be
this.
no cost. We will have relocation specialists that will be working specifically with each family, but there will be no cost to the residents. If there's any cost to do something, if you have to reconnect utilities or change any utilities, we would cover those reconnection fees as well. So there will be no out-of-pocket cost from the residents. We will
Also,
cover
that
those
was
costs.
actually the next question is Columbia Housing going to pay for transfers on utilities, things like cable and water, electricity?
If there is a cost for the transfer, we will pay that cost. If you, are delinquent, we're not going to pay delinquent utility bills, or if you have to pay a deposit because you have a payment history problem, we will not pay that. But any cost that the utility company charges to actually relocate the utility, we will cover those costs.
Okay. And as far as a moving stipend, somebody's asking, will we be giving out monetary assistance to help with the move? Can you explain how that's going to work?
Yeah, there really won't be any cash assistance. We will basically cover all of the moving cost. And so it will just simply be the cost, any cost related to the move will be covered by the housing authority. Gotcha.
Now, I want to go back to something that you mentioned a few minutes ago about the sizing. I know that's an issue that everybody is interested in. So can you explain to us a little bit more about that? If I'm a single person and had 3 kids and they've all graduated, we were in a 2 or 3 bedroom unit, will I still be in a 2 or 3 bedroom unit when I'm put back into the newly renovated unit after renovations are done?
That's a good question, and that's a good example. We found that we have several situations where a mother has raised her children and the children are gone, but the mother's still living in a 2 or a 3 bedroom unit. Under the RAD rules, that single person would have to go to a 1 bedroom unit. So people would have to be sized correctly. We also have situations where we may have a mother with 3 children living in a 2 bedroom unit. In that case, that mother would be moved to a 3 bedroom unit. And so it will work both ways. Some of you are living in units that are too small for your family, and some of you are living in what HUD refers to as overhoused units, which means you have too many bedrooms for your family. And RAD does require that we move everybody to an appropriate size unit, or we have to do what HUD refers to as right sizing. We have to right size your family to the right size unit. And that will be a process as part of the RAD. And I'll mention also that if you do request a voucher to move elsewhere, your voucher size will also be based on the size of your family, not the size of the unit that you currently live in. And so if you're a single person, you're just going to get a 1 bedroom voucher. So you're going to get an appropriate size subsidy for the size of your family.
Okay, that's good to know. That's really good to know. If I wanted to use that voucher, if I wind up with a voucher, a regular voucher, can I use that towards home ownership down the road?
That's a good question. The voucher program does have a home ownership component. And if you have a voucher, you can convert that towards home ownership. But I'll remind everybody that if you want to work towards home ownership, you have to start through the counseling program. And you have to be eligible for a mortgage. So in order to qualify for home ownership, even with the voucher, you have to be able to secure a mortgage, which means you have to be employed and you have to be able to have sufficient credit that the lender would qualify you for a mortgage. We do have a very good home ownership program and a young lady who manages our home ownership program. So she will, anybody who's interested in home ownership, we will provide more information and she can assist you.
Gotcha. Got a question about the relocation and the temporary move in between the renovation and where we are now. Somebody wants to know, will they have options to pick from to move while the repairs are being done, or do you pretty much have to go where the unit you are assigned is?
If you're moving for temporary relocation, you may not have a lot of choice because we're going to have a limited number of units that we can move people to for the temporary relocation. So it's possible, as I mentioned, we anticipate that the temporary relocation will range from about 4 weeks to about 16 weeks. So from about a month to 4 months, depending on the amount of work that we're going to do in any given unit. When you move temporarily, it'll be a unit that we assigned you to. So we may not be able to give you a whole lot of choice for the temporary unit. You are guaranteed under RAD a permanent unit back at the project. So nobody's displaced, nobody will be, moved, permanently anywhere. You all will be guaranteed a unit back at the project. So, but there may be some temporary relocation that has limited choices. We will work very closely with each family and do everything possible to be able to, move you to a place, even on a temporary basis, that will work for you and your family. But I want to be honest in saying, we're going to have limited choices for the temporary relocation.
Gotcha. This question kind of goes back to the sizing, I believe. The challenge is that you've been paying for a particular amount of space. If you are forced to downsize, what do you do with your possessions?
That's a decision that you'll have to determine on an individual basis. Obviously, we can't tell you what to do with your possessions. That's really an individual choice. If you've been in a larger unit that you've not been eligible for, that's really a mistake of the housing authority, because the housing authority should have right-sized the families at the time that your family composition changes. The HUD regulations are pretty clear about that. And if the housing authority hasn't done that in the past, then that's something that we will have to correct going forward. It is a federal regulation, and we have to comply with that.
Gotcha. Somebody's asking if hotels might be an option.
We do not anticipate using hotels. We find that hotels are not really good options. We have used them for emergency, and we like to only use them on an emergency basis. When you're in a hotel, you have limited kitchen, limited space. If it's a family with children, you're sharing a hotel room with the children sometimes. It's just not always a good situation. So we do not anticipate using hotels.
Okay. Got a question from the chat that the process seems kind of punitive to them. What choices will the residents have in the process?
Okay, well, we don't want to think about it as punitive as all, because we're working really hard to upgrade your units and make sure that all of you have really good, high quality, modern units with modern conveniences. We're working really hard with the architect and the engineer to be able to upgrade the units, give you new floors and new kitchens and modern appliances. So we certainly hope that nobody sees this as punitive in any way. Like I say, the temporary relocation, which will be very short term in nature, is something that, we certainly hope it won't be punitive. We're going to give you a decent, safe, and sanitary unit to stay in on the temporary basis, but you will be going back to a permanent unit of the appropriate size. That'll be a newly refurbished new unit.
Okay, got another question about a voucher situation. If someone gets a voucher and there's only 2 people, but they wanted a 3-bedroom and are willing to pay the difference, would they be able to do that?
There's kind of a technical answer to that question. The answer is that maybe. The answer is really a maybe, because what the voucher regulations say is if you have a 2-bedroom voucher and you want to rent a 3-bedroom unit, you can do that and pay the difference, provided the amount that you have to pay does not exceed 40% of your income. So there's a limit. There's a test that we have to do, and it's really based on each individual family's income. So it's called the affordability test. So you can move to a larger unit in some cases, but it's really going to depend on your income and whether or not you'll be eligible. When you get a voucher, you'll attend a class called a briefing. And at that time, the voucher staff will explain to you whether or not you could get a unit that would be more and whether you would be allowed to pay the difference, because it really depends on your household income.
Great. Somebody wants to know if staying with a family member would be an option during that temporary relocation time.
That's a great question. And the answer to that is absolutely yes. When we get ready to start any temporary relocation, we will offer everybody what we call the family and friends option. So you will be able to stay with family and friends, and there will be a stipend that would be paid to your family and friends if you choose to stay with them for the period of time that you have to stay there. So that is an option, absolutely.
Great, great. We've gotten this question at just about every meeting. If I have a child that's in school and don't want to disrupt them, will I be able to keep my child in the school, or will I have to, if I move and that moves me into another district or another school's jurisdiction, what can Columbia Housing do to help me maintain that?
Yeah, we're working very closely with the school district, and we have some upcoming meetings with them. And we will be trying to facilitate children staying in the same school. If your move is going to be during the school year, we're going to work very hard to try to make sure that your children can stay within the same school district insofar as possible. We're hoping that the school district will allow us to make those arrangements to be able to keep children in the same school, especially for those temporary moves. We don't want anybody to have to switch schools on a temporary basis.
Great. And another question about the temporary moving. Will residents be asked to move to other housing complexes like Latimer Manor?
No, all of the residents in the scattered sites, you may have to move to another scattered site. So for example, if we take the first 6 properties and you live in property A, we might temporarily move you to property B until we finish with property A, but nobody will move any place other than within this group. So the scattered sites are kind of a standalone project by themselves. So the 18 properties in the scattered sites will basically be where we are working with to move people.
Okay, great. What about if I received a utility check before the renovations started? Once the renovations are complete and I've returned to that community, will I still get a utility check?
I want to emphasize that the calculation for rent on the voucher program is the same as it is for the public housing program. So when the units convert from public housing to project-based vouchers, your rent will be calculated using the same formula. The only difference would be as if you are on a flat rent. If you have a public housing flat rent, then it is possible that your rent could change. If you're on a flat rent, you're not getting a utility reimbursement. So if you are on a flat rent, however, the voucher program does not have flat rents. So when you go to the vouchers, your rent is going to be 30% of your income, and there will not be a flat rent. But if that results in an increase of more than 10% or $25, then it will be phased in over a 3-year period, and it will not happen all at one time. So if you're currently getting a utility housing assistance payment based because your income is less than what the utility allowance is, then that would stay relatively the same.
Okay, great. Somebody asking if it would just be easier to move folks' items and belongings into storage rather than having to move them 2 or 3 times. Have we looked at those kind of options?
Well, we're certainly not hoping to move anybody 3 times, and we're hoping to move only a few people 2 times. But if, for example, somebody was going to stay with family and friends, we would make arrangements to put your stuff in storage while you stayed with family and friends, and then we would bring your stuff back out of storage once your unit is completed. So we will be working on a flexible basis depending on what each family's individual circumstances.
Okay. Got a kind of a follow-up to one of the questions that we had asked earlier about the downsizing and what to do with your possessions. The same person asked if they got a refund, and I'm kind of assuming it means if they were overhoused and had been in a unit that they shouldn't have been in, would there be some sort of refund or consideration given to those families?
No, your rent has always been based on your income. And no matter whether you live in a 1-bedroom unit or a 5-bedroom unit, your rent does not have anything to do with the size of the unit. It's strictly based on the income of your household.
Okay. And sort of again, back to the question of whether or not this is punitive. Got some feedback that residents have not been asked what we would like to do in this process, which makes it punitive. In some cases, we will have less than what we have now. This is simply unfair.
Again, I want to reiterate that no one should see this as punitive. It is intended to provide you with much better quality housing. We're providing general information through these meetings. When HUD approves the RAD application and we actually get ready to begin this process, there will be a relocation worker that will be meeting with each of you and talking to you individually to see specifically what you would like to do during these, during this time period. We will come back to you with much more information when we know which buildings we'll be starting with, how much rehab work is going to be done in each building, and approximately the time that somebody would have to be temporarily relocated. In some instances, there might be some of the properties when we might be able to do rehab work with tenants in the unit. Most of them we're anticipating that we're going to be doing a level of work that would make it difficult and uncomfortable for you to stay in your unit while the contractors are working there, which is why we're anticipating that most everybody will be gone for a short period of time from your unit. But again, I want to reiterate, please do not perceive this as punitive. This is really to provide you with a much better quality housing. We know that the majority of these properties need quite a bit of work. We have a couple of them that are newer, in which they will need a minimal amount of work. So there may be some of you, for example, at Rosewood or in the elderly cottages. Those properties are much newer. They're 10 years old versus being 40 and 50 and 60 years old. The older properties will have more work. The newer properties will have much less work. So again, we hope that nobody views this as punitive. That is absolutely not the intent. The intent is to allow us to be able to make significant improvements in the property so that all of you have better quality housing.
Great. Yeah, I having seen some of the plans and been in all these conversations, it's really an exciting time, and we're going to be bringing new units back basically to replace what we have now. So it is an exciting opportunity. I've got a question about somebody. This is more of a sizing question and kind of specific, but somebody whose husband has some medical issues and he needs his own room for medical equipment, but they're currently only in a 1-bedroom. Is that something that will be taken into consideration when we're assigning units?
Yes, that's something that HUD refers to as a reasonable accommodation. If you have an individual in your household who has a disability or some kind of special needs, then there's a process through which you can bring in medical documentation to us, and then that will provide documentation that tells us what your needs are, and we will work with you on that basis.
So there will be handicap accessible units and disabled accessible units in the newly renovated.
Unfortunately, again, a lot of the older properties that are in this group of 18 properties, it's difficult to make them fully accessible. So if you need a fully accessible unit, we will work with you to do the best that we can. In some cases, we had an example just recently of a family living in one of the units here in scattered sites, and we had a structural engineer look at the unit, and we found that we just simply could not make it fully accessible because it would basically impact the structure of the building and make it unsafe to move a wall. And so in that case, we found another unit that is fully accessible. We offered that unit to the family, and the family was able to move to a fully accessible unit elsewhere. So again, those are special individual circumstances, and we will have a relocation specialist that will work with every family to make sure that we understand what your needs are, what your desires are, and we will try to work with each of you to give you the best options possible but please understand that we do have rules and regulations that we have to follow, and we will have to follow some of those. So we may not be able to give everybody what they want, but we're going to try as hard as possible to give you as much as we can that is what you need and what you want, and in much better quality housing.
Will there be any additional site amenities like wireless or basketball courts or community rooms in these newly renovated properties?
Again, that depends on the property. Some properties have room to add that and some properties do not. We don't have a lot of land with some of the properties. So we are going to provide some Wi-Fi. There will be a hotspot or a couple of hotspots available. But basically, you know, there will be some amenities where we can make them. One of the scattered site properties, we put a new playground in already this spring. So where we can put some amenities, we will. Other places, it's really difficult because the land just isn't there to allow us to do that.
Gotcha. Is St. Andrews Terrace a part of what we're talking about? And maybe you can just put that slide back up. If not, we can definitely put it. But what are the sites that are covered in scattered sites?
Let me pull the list back up again here of the properties that
Right.
make up scattered sites. Okay. Here we go. So these are the properties that make up the scattered sites. Okay. It's all of these properties here. As I mentioned, Rosewood Hills and Rosewood Senior, as well as the elderly cottages, all three of those properties are relatively new, and the work that we'll be doing in those properties will be substantially less than what we might be doing in some of the other properties. Okay. And so St. Andrews Terrace actually is one of the properties. I don't know if Adam is on. Are we using a different name here for St. Andrews Terrace?
It's just missing from the list right now.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Excuse me, and thank you for whoever brought that up from St. Andrews Terrace. It is missing from the list. St. Andrews Terrace is one of the properties that is part of scattered sites.
Great.
And like I mentioned, the Rosewood properties, Rosewood Hills, Rosewood Senior, the elderly cottages, and even Celia Saxon, these are newer properties. So the amount, again, we don't have the total detailed reports back from the architect yet, but the newer properties will have much less work done than the older properties. Most of the older properties will be the ones that need to have a lot more work done on them. So depending on which property you live, this conversion under RAD will have a different impact on you.
Gotcha. Getting some questions about bedroom size and assignments, and these are going to get they start getting specific really fast. So a lot of times it's best to talk to your property manager, but just as a general rule, will siblings that are of the same sex be placed in one bedroom for bedroom calculation sizes?
And the answer to that is yes. Generally, the answer is yes. There's a few exceptions, but very few. So generally, same-sex children share a bedroom. That's basically a HUD requirement. The general rule of thumb is 2 people per sleeping room, with the exception of opposite sex over the age of 2. Okay. And people of different generations. So if you had a grandmother, a mother, and a child, and all are female, they would qualify for a 3-bedroom. Okay. If you just have a mother and a daughter, or a mother and 2 daughters, they would qualify for a 2-bedroom. So it really depends on your individual family circumstance. And that's something that, you know, when we meet with you individually, we can share that information with each of you as we look at your individual family circumstance.
Okay. Is there going to be a set cost for 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units, or is this all still going to be income based?
It's all income based. Again, what we're doing is we're converting public housing to project-based vouchers. Both the public housing program and the voucher program calculate tenant portion of the rent in the same manner. So the rent will continue to be 30% of your income.
Okay, great. Somebody had asked, that St. Andrews had seen some remodeling work done earlier. So what are we doing that hasn't been done already for St. Andrews Terrace?
Adam?
St. Andrews Terrace had kitchens and bathrooms redone, but we're going to go back in there, do the floorings, the ceilings, maybe do a little bit of rewiring, hot water heaters, HVAC system. So yes, it has had a little bit of a facelift of kitchens and baths, but we're going to really make the unit brand new.
Awesome. And again, sort of another question, sounds like as far as the temporary relocation piece goes, the scattered sites that were listed before, are those the sites that the people in the scattered sites group will be placed back into, Ms. Herrera?
Yes, the scattered sites will be combined as a single group. And as I said, we'll be breaking it into probably 3 different groups. So there might be 6 properties that we do together at one time. So you might just be moved within some of those properties. And we're going to try to do it as geographical as possible. So the properties that are closest together, we will work on those all together. So we're going to try to do this geographically to keep everybody as close to where they are, even during the temporary period.
Will there be washer and dryer connections at St. Andrews Terrace?
I can't tell you specifically right now, but we are actually trying to provide washers and dryers in every unit if we can. Some of them don't have room. And again, we're working within existing walls, but we are trying to find, in some cases, it might be a stackable washer and dryer that we can fit into a closet. So we are looking at washers and dryers in all the units.
Okay, great.
On the subject of St. Andrews, we did run into some issues that some people had dryers, but they were never vented correctly.
Correct.
And so we'll have our architects and engineers look at venting all the washers and all the dryers properly.
Great. Are we going to add any bedrooms? So if a 3-bedroom unit only has 1 bath, 1 bedroom, one bathroom right now, is there a possibility that we would be adding bathrooms to units that only have 1?
One of the options we are looking at, we may, because again, the size of the units and the makeup of them, we're looking at trying to add at least a half bath where it might be possible. So again, it's going to depend on each property is going to be a little different. And even within the same property, some of the units might be different. So we're looking at all of those options. We really would like to have at least a bath and a half in the 2 bedrooms or larger. And we'd like to have 2 full baths, but we're not sure if we can do that.
Gotcha. If somebody has to downsize, will that change the property where they live or can return to?
That is a possibility. The HUD regulations actually say that we have to appropriately size people within the project. And the scattered sites is considered a single project. So it means that we have to right size you within the various properties. And so we need to, try to right size everybody insofar as possible. And it is possible that somebody may have to live in a different unit if the property where you're currently at does not have the size that you need.
Okay, got another St. Andrews Terrace question specifically. Says that her apartment was vented properly, but it was never reconnected. I'm assuming the washer dryer. What can we do about that?
Please contact your property manager. I think we have the property manager on.
Yeah, Ms. Farmer, you want to pop in and say hello?
I'm here.
Okay. Twana, do you want to just let the residents know that they can reach you and how to reach you?
Yes, you can call the office at 803-376-6157, or you can email me at tfarmer@columbiahousingsc.org. And I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah, if you put it in the chat, that'd be great. Thank you, Twana. Appreciate it. So if you have anything in your apartment currently that needs to be addressed, please contact your property manager and they will make sure that it gets addressed now.
Will we be upgrading washer and dryer units for units that already have them?
We will be providing washers and dryers insofar as possible. So we'll let you know. We don't know for sure yet, what we're going to be able to do. So that's something that, again, we're trying to look at washers and dryers. Not all the units are going to be able to accommodate them, but where they can, we are going to try to make that happen.
Great. We have had some awesome questions. We've gone a little bit over what we have normally allotted for this, but we've been able to answer a lot of questions, some tough, and looks like we're kind of at the end of the time that we've got set aside for today. Ms. Herrera, if you want to say some closing remarks.
Well, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate your feedback. Again, I want to reiterate that this is a very preliminary start of the process. In order to submit the application to HUD, we have to hold the meetings with the tenants. The 2 meetings that we've held will now allow us to move forward to submit our application. Your feedback has been wonderful. We will, incorporate all of the things we've heard from you. And once we get our application approved from HUD and the architect and engineer has gone through each of the properties and finished all of the assessment, we will then meet back with you and talk more specifically about what plans we specifically have for each property. Again, because this is a scattered site piece of our portfolio, the properties are also different. And so we've given you ideas of what we want to do, but what we're actually able to do at each property will vary depending on that property. So once we know that, we will meet with the properties individually to talk a little bit more specific about what we can do at your property. And again, I want to assure everybody that this is really intended to provide you with a much better quality housing, and at the same time provide you with some options about your housing. Right now, if you were to move from your public housing unit, you would not be able to take your assistance with you. Once we do the conversion, you will have the option in the future to request a voucher and be able to move to another place of your choice if you choose to do that. So I hope nobody is viewing this as in any way punitive. We are very excited about having an opportunity to finally make some significant repairs to your units and be able to provide you with significant improved quality units. So that's really our goal, and we look forward to working with you more as we move forward. So thank you all very much for your time today. Lead, was there anything else?
That's it. Thanks everybody for coming, and we appreciate it.
And you'll hear back from us within the next couple of months once we hear from HUD. Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.